is a time of brutal anti-Arab and anti-Islamic persecution. Bombing hospitals, universities, man-made starvation. These horrors could not happen without the prejudices of huge segments of public opinion. 50% of Americans think Islam is incompatible with democracy. 49% of Germans, 48% of Britons, 42% of French. Across the entire Western world, an intense bigotry is openly practiced and expressed. Our country is witnessing and backing the worst massacres of civilians using U.S. weapons since the illegal invasion of Iraq. The entire institutional Western establishment continues to back what the majority of global human rights organizations consider gross violations of international law and what most U.S. Democrats consider a genocide. And in turn, Muslims across the world have a negative impression toward the West, particularly our leaders, but not because of our freedoms or our way of life, but our bombs. Britain and its imperial protege, the U.S. military, dropped 30,000 bombs on Iraq, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. Our government has dropped bombs on Yemen, Iran, Libya, Lebanon, Kuwait, Somalia, Bosnia, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, the Sudan, Kosovo, Pakistan, and Syria. And that's just since the 1980s. And right now, U.S. bombs continue to rain down on Palestine, killing countless civilians, women, and children. Western governments have for too long been shameless in branding themselves the standard bearers of human rights, civility, the rule of law, religious freedom, and global leadership against the backwards and barbarous peoples of the rest of the world. As a French philosopher once said, "There's nothing more terrible and more terrifying than to be captured by the dreams of others." Shocking European leaders out of their stupor when Gandhi was once asked his impression of Western civilization, he said he thought it would be a good idea. While Western countries constantly whip up a frenzy of fear about religious extremism among Muslims infiltrating America's or Europe's value system, polls by Gallup and Pew reveal that most Muslims see no contradiction at all between democratic values and their religious beliefs. In the UK and America, Muslims overwhelmingly vote left, leaning deeply into secular, democratic, and progressive principles. And while the religion itself sprang from events that occurred in what is now called Saudi Arabia, fewer than 20% of Muslims in the world are Arab. And not all Arabs are Muslim. Many are Christian, Druze, Baha'i, Jewish, and so forth. Islam is a majority faith in 49 diverse countries. Muslims speak hundreds of languages, and globally and nationally, vast majorities oppose extremism and violence. Now contrast that for a second with the 1 in 3 white evangelicals in the USA who think political violence may be required to save the country. That's markedly higher than any other religious group here in the United States. And while there have been horrific attacks on the US and its allies in modern times, these are not the result of any differences in faith, but the inevitable blowback against the horrific military actions of a brutal empire. The reality is that the entire trope of Western civilization existing somehow in opposition to an Eastern world is completely made up. It's a total ruse, cynically exploited by economic monopolists to sow chaos and division among a human race that shares nearly everything in common. It is a time of brutal anti-Arab and anti-Islamic persecution, bombing